Listen Inside You is an album that was released during 2001 and was essentially the last studio album from the indie band Unwound. Unwound for a while have been known in the 90s for their post-hardcore sound, especially during their early days with albums like Fake Train and the self-title. What made Unwound different from other post-hardcore bands at the time, however, was that they had a more noisy rock approach and they had a very dissonant and angular style that carried most of their discography. The band will, however, begin experimenting with other genres and sounds throughout. New Plastic Ideas, for example, began experimenting with post-rock in some songs, and Challenge for a Civilized Society will also experiment with mad rock. However, the biggest departure that they've actually ever made was actually in Listen Inside You. While the album still has some bits of post-hardcore here and there, the album goes for a more atmospheric, experimental, and generally more melancholic sound than their previous albums. It is also probably the most post-rock sounding album that they've ever made, not necessarily an album that I will define generally as post-rock, but it is the closest from all of the records to getting that level for me. Despite all of that, this is their most acclaimed and well-known album to date, as well as not only being my favorite album from Unwound, but also it's actually my favorite album of all time. Yes, I actually do hold it in that high of a pedestal. I'll be going track by track, but also I'll be giving some closing thoughts at the end of the video. So, hey, let's talk about it. First track of the album begins with some unnerving scenes and then it is immediately followed up by a 2-minute drone. Yeah, the most alienating thing about the whole record is actually at the very start, which might actually lead to some people thinking that they're listening to a drone album instead of an artsy indie rock one. That said, I think the intro of the song is perfect, since it pretty much sets the mood and tone of what you're about to encounter. In other words, the first 2 minutes I will consider pretty much as the opening gates. In fact, the whole song is a perfect introduction to the generally distant and alienated feel of the record, like the drony and somber vocals, the mysterious great riffs, the little atmospheric bursts, and the great drumming that is present in many other tracks. Look at Ghost is probably the catchiest and most instant track here. A lot of it is mainly led by its repetitive nature and jangly rhythms that are very memorable and immediately stick out. It is probably the poppiest, but also manages to go really well with the overall darker, cold sound from the album. This is mainly a thing that I love from nearly every song here, but the guitar tones are one of my favorite things about it as well. They feel very satisfying to listen to and they complement the song very well. This song has a lot of it going for, mainly the heavy bass line and the repeated abrasive chords that create some feeling of suspense, especially in how much it builds in the start of the song. I love the chorus, especially with the constantly anxious, energetic guitar. I love the little static chord melody right after the chorus. The song in particular defines but also refines a lot of the defining elements from the band, bringing a lot of the rougher post-hardcore elements from their previous albums to an excellent execution and production here. It is also one of the more suspensive and anxious tracks. Kind of like We Invent You, Treachery starts with some unurban scenes that the difference here is that they feel more messy and disorganized. Aside from that, the two things that I mainly love from the song is the mysterious story-like approach on the lyrics, which are backed up by the guitars that add a lot of the driving textural backbone to them, but also the bits, especially with those synth drones. And I love the convoluted shoegaze-like ending that ends the track in its most shivering moment yet. Terminus is one of the biggest songs from the album, not just because it's one of the most acclaimed, but it's actually one of the longest here as well. Following an adventurous structure through a number of 3 different sections, it is an absolute masterpiece, and it's definitely up there as one of my favorite songs of all time. Not only are all the three sections from the song perfect, from the more post-hardcore oriented first third that has some of their absolute best drumming, the haunting madness, the 17-second section, and the beautiful, deep, lonely atmosphere from the last section. But all the three acts from the song flow together perfectly as well. What I love even more about this song is that it could have perfectly ended at the 6-minute mark, and it still would have been a perfect song. But that last section makes the song even better than it already was. It is a monumental track. This song is also one of my favorites from the album. Feels weird saying that for an album where nearly every track is a favorite, but you know it happens. There's not much to say about this one. Demons Sing Love Songs is just one of those songs that doesn't really do many wild or experimental things, but just works so perfectly, cohesively. The swinging melody that works wonderfully with the punchy drums, the vocal melody, which is one of my favorites from the album. There's just kind of a unique melodic feel to the song that it's just hard to describe, but it's definitely one that I always come back to. Remember when I mentioned that December had some repeated abrasive chords that create some sort of an anxious feel? Well, Off the Center it takes that idea to another level, as the song straight up starts with that at the center front, and it's great. Those repeated chord sections don't just appear at the beginning, by the way. And that's kind of what I love about this song mainly, where it focuses on creating these noisy and intense soundscapes around its riffs. And I really love the production across the album in general as well, but I said this is probably one of the best produced tracks here. That especially shines throughout the last 90 seconds. I especially love this part. One thing that I admire from albums in general are the ones that you're able to find something new and refreshing during each listen. In other words, the album starts growing on you and you start finding new songs and elements to appreciate more. Listener Inside You is definitely no exception, since this is one of those songs that have grown on me the most on re-listens. One Lick Less has probably one of the most unnerving atmospheres out of all the tracks. It starts with a little abrasive drum sequence jump scare, and then it immediately dissolves into a slower, isolated track that never fails to send me chills every time I listen to it. I also love when the little drum enters somewhere halfway through the song that leads into kind of a gentle climax that manages to fit in well with the rest of the atmosphere of the song. Scarlette is such a perfect song. It is one of those songs that's ferocious in a way that I haven't really seen any other song do it quite like. The intro of the song is insane, with the accelerating riff that provides kind of an instantaneous, harsh suspense. It feels like it's quickly building steam, then when it leads to the chorus, you get one of the most insane and chilling vocals that I've heard in any song. Like, I don't even know how you manage to make your voice sound like that. And the little textural daunting sounds throughout the track, especially present on the interlude and bridge of the song, makes this song even more memorable than it already was. By the way, shout out to the music video of the song, that is, well, trippy to say the least. This is another song that is also probably up there as one of my favorite songs of all time, and what it feels to me like the essential unwound song. Everything about this song is just perfect. It has probably my favorite melody from the whole album that just alone can already carry it to a great track, but the constant drumming, the amazing layering on the textures, with a lot of the subtle little secondary melodies that build around the song perfectly. And my favorite part of the song is probably this one. With another unforgettable vocal filter that just feels very chilling as well, and it's also part of the song where the drums just shine the most. It is just absolutely fantastic. And then we have Summer Freeze. I remember when I first heard this album for the first time, this song in particular was actually my favorite, and while it's no longer my favorite song here, I still really love it. The most notable thing about this song for me is the vocal approach here. I've been talking about the album's vocals for pretty much 3 songs in a row at this point, but it does go to show just how unique the vocals are throughout the record. In here, there's kind of a daunting swing to the vocals, especially during the chorus with the part. And I love the repeated melody here as well, since not only it perfectly complements the vocals, but it manages to stand well on its own, never losing the freshness from the atmosphere, especially in how much the soundscapes enhance it throughout. Okay, so now we have arrived to the last portion of the album, which is where it starts to become more post-rock and atmosphere-centered, and it's also where it starts to become more abstract when it comes to structure and generally the songwriting. The song starts with what I believe to be a sample that has kind of a rough lo-fi sound to it, and well, the rest of the song is quite alright. Every song prior to Radiogra has kind of an isolated feel to them, but this song and the song after that takes that to 11, where it creates a strong spacey ambience that's just beyond haunting. And yeah, just like Scarlette, shout out to the music video too, it's very cryptic. This is another song that has grown on me a lot on subsequent listens. It's the longest song on the album and it builds in a very strange way, with bits of small drum sequences and splashes of guitar effects that start to add up more and more in a very subtle manner. The riffs become more complex, the drums get layered a little bit differently with every subsequent moment throughout. It is an absurdly unique song. Probably the most unique song on the album, maybe one of the weirdest experimental approaches that I've ever seen on any song. Like, I cannot think of another song that did something like this. Even the vocals, every time that they enter the song, they kind of feel like they're finishing off a section. It's post-rock just right on its own lane, absolutely stunning in every way, and I will describe it as the definition of a song that you're always going to find something new to appreciate on it, just because of how absurd and crazy it is. Well, now we're finally at the very end of the album. Considering that Below the Salt is the weirdest and most alienated track here, it will make sense that the band will end the album there. I mean, it is a perfect ending to the album after all, but instead the band decides to end the album with circus music. Priceless. I've seen a lot of people say that they don't like the track because of how much of a nonsensical way it ends the whole experience, but I love it. It's not only wonderful trolling in a way, but it still feels like a fitting finale. Before the circus bit starts, there's a final little atmospheric center section that's already great, and the fact that it gets followed up by straight up switching to circus music only adds to the surreal aspect of it all. After the band finished the album, it will go on to become critically acclaimed, and despite the fact that this will end up becoming the last studio album that they will ever release, that wasn't actually part of the plan. After Leaves, the band will try to tour in the US to support the album, but the tour went horribly. The band members were being poorly rehearsed, one of the members suffered from alcoholism due to distress, there was 9/11, and all of it resulted in the cancellation of many shows. Afterwards, the band was planning to become a studio-only band, but some of the members disagreed with that idea. All of that plus the fact that, well, all of them were living far away from each other, it resulted in the band breaking up, which was announced in 2002, a year after the album came out. And yeah, that might sound like a bummer, but at the same time, they left out in a really high note, not only in their best album, but their most cutting-edge, influential, and overall most recognizable album to date. Even if that wasn't necessarily part of the plan, it does feel like a perfect final hurrah to an already great discography, with an album that combines a lot of the elements from their past albums with a lot of the experimentation that they did in this record. They made something truly special, crafting an album that feels like a complete experience, but also one where the songs can be listened to on their own perfectly. It is a masterpiece of an album and one that I would recommend listening to in October as well, considering the kind of Halloweenish sound that it has. It's daunting, it's surreal, it's surprising, it's Unwound's most defining moment as a musical act.